Good afternoon, everyone. 5, I call to order the September meeting of the Administration and Government Affairs Committee meeting. This afternoon, we have 2 agenda items, and particularly this particular meeting for this month of September, we'll be focusing on plans and preparations that are going on within the state for our upcoming legislative session. So at this time, Councilor, I'd like to ask if you had an opportunity to read the minutes and if we can get a motion to approve.
Yes, I'd make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, I second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Those minutes from June 10th, 2025 are approved. We do have 2 agenda items today where we'll be discussing information that's related to our upcoming legislative session. And we want to talk about things that are being done on the state level as well within the city of Birmingham as we prepare for that session. So our first agenda item will be an update on a recent meeting that was held with the Alabama League of Municipalities. And this meeting was held with legislative committee members, and as we went and reviewed items that could be placed on the legislative agenda for this upcoming session. So if I could have the slides, please. All right, thank you. So the members of the Alabama League of Municipalities, we did have a meeting of our ALM standing committees, and so attending that meeting were Councilor Quinn, Councilor Smitherman, and myself. This particular meeting is where we joined other elected officials from across the state to outline priorities for the upcoming 2026 Alabama legislative session. The standing committee meetings resulted in recommending legislative statements that will shape the ALM 2026 legislative agenda. Everything 2020 ALM legislative agenda. Those statements would ultimately shape bills that would affect all of us in the state of Alabama, other municipalities, townships, counties, and etc. Just for a little background, the Alabama League of Municipalities does have 6 standing committees, and this is comprised of mayors, council members from other congressional districts, from each of the congressional districts in the state. Now, each standing committee meeting included a range of speakers. Typically, there were about 4 speakers who gave updates regarding items that were on the past legislative session, as well as a review or preview of pre-filed bills that have already been filed for the upcoming 2026 session. Some of the pre-filed bills included police chief takeover, enforcement of immigration law, issuance of out-of-state warrants, creation of crime for giving false information when asked by an arresting officer. There are multiple bills that have been filed, and we'll probably hear from our government affairs team on some of those as well. But this just gives you an idea of some of the information that was shared with us during those sessions with those 6 standing committees. Just as a reminder, the 2026 Alabama legislative session does start on January 13th. Dr. Quinn, you were present in some of those sessions. You just want to give an idea of some of the things that you heard in the particular committee meeting that you attended?
Yeah, so I attended the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Standing Committee meeting, and we heard from several of the state departments that are related under those topics, such as ADEM and the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. In particular, one of the things that was notable is how ADC&R and the folks who do take care of our parks, you know, state parks and outdoor amenities, how, you know, some of the activities that are taking place with those amenities feed into the Catalyst initiative and the state's overall economic development strategy. So it was interesting to, you know, have a kind of firsthand account from the executive leadership team in that department, talking about, how things like having new outdoor walking and biking trails really helps with our overall state economy. So that was interesting, but probably the most engaged part of the day was the actual legislative committee, where you had mayors and councilors from all over the state just sort of having an open forum almost to discuss issues, and some of those were related to the recent elections, because, of course, that's top of mind for a lot of folks. So there were a lot of things that, came out in that conversation that are related to, how people, the time periods between qualifying and the actual election, and then, how the runoffs actually work and what happens in the event of a tie, which I guess in some of our smaller municipalities is something that, is likely more likely to happen with a smaller number of voters. But, it was great to talk about, waste management and just, a lot of other things at that level. Of course, some of the more concerning things were the issues that ALM brought to our attention regarding the upcoming legislative agenda. One in particular is the suggestion that not producing some form of identification or not identifying yourself could be deemed a crime. So, those are things that I don't know if I was aware of that, prior to them bringing it to our attention. So definitely, appreciate that. It was a good meeting.
I thought so as well. I attended the Public Safety Committee meeting, actually had the opportunity to share that one. And so with that particular standing committee, we heard similar issues as related, though, to public safety. And we did have speakers from ALEA, the Office of Information Technology, AEMA, which is like the Alabama arm of FEMA, and also heard from an officer from the city of Huntsville. So just having that opportunity to sit with other local elected officials and find out, sometimes no matter how small or large the municipality is, we deal with the same type of subjects. But like you, I found the thing about making it a crime for information that you do or do not provide at the time of arrest, may come up as a particular interest with the next set of bills that they will actually be taking into consideration. We also had an opportunity where the gentleman from ALEA also talked about some of the success stories that they had in the last legislative session. And of course, what's important for us in Birmingham was SB 126, which was the Glock switch ban, and that of course has made a significant impact here in the city of Birmingham, and how we federalize some of those laws that helps us to go after those people that are using those weapons unlawfully. I do have just a couple of slides, and I know that we'll have more about this during when we have our government affairs team to come up, but some of the pre-filed bills that they talked about in the public safety, one was HB 36. This one has been pre-filed by Representative Reed Ingram, and this is one that, of course, is getting some national attention about the opportunity for the governor to appoint an interim police chief and take over that position. And this would authorize the Attorney General and the governor to appoint an interim police chief of certain municipal police departments if it was determined that a particular and ongoing threat to public safety existed within the municipality. So that's one that we'll definitely want to be watching here within the city of Birmingham. Another example of one is HB 13 that has been pre-filed by Representative Ernie Yarbrough. This one provides that state and local law enforcement agencies may enter into an MEO or a Memo of Understanding, an MOU, and agreements with certain federal agencies for the purpose of enforcing federal immigration and custom laws and the detention, removal, and investigation of illegal aliens and the immigration status of any individual in this state. And it goes on, but particularly this pre-filed bill deals with immigration status and what any type of what is it, when we call it, when we go into an interlocal agreement on how we would be able to deputize and enforce, give the enforcement for officers when it comes to transporting an illegal alien and other information for that. So this is just some examples of the pre-filed bill. It also was actually 2 pages that they gave us some information. It would also allow local, state and local officers to arrest illegal alien based on his or her status of a illegal alien or a violation of any federal immigration laws. Also requires some quarterly reporting by the county and municipal jails regarding foreign nationals. So again, these were just 2 examples of pre-filed bills, and I believe there was most of that in each one of the standing committees. You had the speakers, and then you had an opportunity to discuss pre-filed bills. I found it particularly noteworthy and learning for me, again, to have this opportunity through ALM to meet and just as Dr. O'Quinn has stated, that opportunity to talk about issues that, again, no matter what size of municipality, it often can hit home to each of us. One of the things that I found also, and we did actually, Birmingham was mentioned in this particular session, was on the information technology. We know when it comes to cyber technology or cybersecurity is a very important risk to municipalities. And so one of the suggestions was that each city or municipality should take cybersecurity very seriously and put in every type of safeguards they can, because this is a public safety nuisance as strong as gun violence. And of course, we know what can happen to a city when they come under cyber attack. So there was just, we're far ahead of what small cities, some of them don't have the resources that we have, but ALEA is helping to provide those resources to small cities, and there are even grants that they could have. So I found that very encouraging. Any other information you want to share about just particularly how ALM is going about building their legislative agenda?
Yeah, well, I think it's important for folks who may be watching just to understand that, we are not in this alone, and ALM provides a platform for us to, come together as municipalities and share concerns. And, a lot of the concerns are, even though our politics may look, different, we have residents that still have the same basic concerns. There was a lot of conversation about healthcare, and fortunately, Birmingham is the center of healthcare in Alabama, but we have a lot of smaller municipalities around the state who have lost access to healthcare, and that's something that we care about too. Just because we have multiple hospitals in the city of Birmingham, doesn't mean that that's an issue that we don't care about. We all have friends and relatives and associates, that live in other parts of the state, and we want our state to thrive. So that's an issue that, we pay attention to as well. And could, when you talk about Medicare expansion, that could have a tremendous impact on a lot of our residents as well. So it's just a great platform, to sort of get outside of the Birmingham bubble and talk to other folks. So I really appreciate it. In the same way that we get to do the same thing on a national level through National League of Cities.
I agree, and I echo those sentiments. It's just a great opportunity to learn some best practices and really to see how other local elected officials tackle problems similar to those that we have. And when we talk about some of the healthcare issues around the state, I know that before I retired, I worked for a regional blood center, and that was very strong in having a network of small rural hospitals throughout the state. And pretty much because of finances or COVID and other things, most of those hospitals no longer exist. And so Birmingham, with the number of hospitals that we have, we still have a lot of residents throughout the state that actually have to drive into Birmingham for just some of the things that we get on a daily basis when it comes to health care. Right. And so, of course, we want to look at legislatively. We know the challenges that we have in our state when it comes to Medicare, Medicaid coverage. And so just having that dialogue with some of those officials was also made me mindful of the resources that we have here in the city of Birmingham. All right. Well, thank you. Well, again, we did have that opportunity. You'll be hearing more information. Those legislative statements that we created in each of those standing committees, those will be used to build the Alabama League of Municipalities, their legislative agenda. And so we look forward to that. They're working on that now at the completion of our meeting. The next agenda item, we really want to focus, and this is sort of a lead-in to how the city of Birmingham will function as we begin to build our 2026 legislative agenda. So this afternoon, Mr. Earl Hilliard Jr. with our Government Affairs Committee will give us just some information regarding that process. Thank you, Mr. Hilliard.
Good afternoon, Earl Hilliard Jr., Senior Public Affairs Officer. First, I want to say I'm so excited that y'all went to the ALM event. I always suggest and think it's just a wonderful thing, especially when we work with our partners, the people, because as you know, we work with ALM year-round. We work with their lobbyists, their government affairs team the entire year. And they're not the only ones, even locally, the Jefferson County mayors, you know, they put together a legislative agenda and they'll have a legislative agenda session statewide. The Big Ten mayors will do the same thing. And there are other groups that do it that we tend to work with on specific events, specific legislation. But it's wonderful to actually take part with ALM because they're a treasure trove of information. And once again, it doesn't matter what size they are. They do tend to have some of the same issues. Now, you guys have covered a lot of what I was going to say, which is great. I'm going to reiterate a couple of things. The legislative session, as you know, the legislative session changes according to how close it is to the election. Right after the election, it'll start in March, and then it goes February, and then January, the year of the election. So it starts January 13th, and they estimate the end will be March 26th. Typically, during election years, they tend to stay away from what we would consider to be inflammatory type bills. That is no longer true. So there are a lot of different things. You mentioned some of them, and matter of fact, I can kind of skip and just go out of order just a little bit and just talk about just a couple of the other ones. Some of the things don't directly affect us as the city as much as it affects our citizenry and a lot of the entities like the Birmingham City Schools and other things. One of the ones I thought was interesting is that they have one that talks about mandating the Star Spangled Banner weekly and as you know, nationally, that has been one, and it is hit here, and so nationally, you know, mandating that for city schools. Some of the things that we have fought off before, like the Alabama Memorial Preservation Act, it's back, and this one is one where it requires memorial markers where things used to be, and the reason why you have to be careful is because it changes form. So what you see in the beginning might not be what a slight amendment gets put on, so we have to stay vigilant on that one. For those of you who care about it, I just always like to throw in the little funny ones that there's also a bill to make illegal slap fighting. So if you ever watch slap fighting excerpts on the internet or on television, there's a bill to make that illegal. There's a bill that would mandate, or I shouldn't say mandate, it would say to renew your driver's license, you would have to be enrolled in school and attendance confirmed in school. I don't know right now how they want to do that. I know people are always trying to encourage children to go to school and their incentives and other things. This seems like one to, I guess, help with the truancy problem or the truancy issue. I'm not sure how it will be carried out, but we'll be following that one because it could have some unintended consequences or side effects. You mentioned HB 36, the possibility of appointing the interim police chief by the Attorney General and the Governor. As you know, last year we did our best to make sure that that would not happen, and that one is back. I was trying to see if there's anything else worth noting. There are a couple that affect us here that we have to just watch out for as we see how the bills unfold. This one's been pre-filed. It would affect competitive bidding when it comes to public works contracts. And that is SB 14 from Livingston, and they provide exemptions. So it sounds like one off the top that might be something that may be preferable, but once again, sometimes when people do exemption bills, they add other things in that make it not acceptable for a city of our side. There's some other bills, HB 17, that deals with municipal audits and anything that tends to revise audit bills that we want to make sure that we know about it. I know that there are 56 bills that are pre-filed right now, but once again, that's going to change daily because yesterday it was like 52. So every day, we'll have to just keep watching as people will drop bills. There'll be multiple bills. Someone will see a bill they like, and they'll put their bill version out. So that kind of thing doubles it up. So we'll keep monitoring it and changing it. One thing I wanted to mention is we know, I got word today that one of the things that they want us to think about on our legislative agenda is supporting the trying to get money from the state for a brownfield study for the state. And so that's going to come with some encouragement. We'll have to explain to people what brownfields are, explain to people why it's important. Sometimes people just assume that brownfields are just an urban thing, or they just assume it's just a city thing, and we have to explain it's not. But as you know, with people having brownfield in their districts, how important it would be to be able to get a study done, which means it might lead to greater funding to be able to deal with those situations. It's not on here, but we know the SSUT language is coming back, simplified seller's usage tax bill is going to come back. Right now, there is litigation. As you know, the city of Tuscaloosa has filed suit on behalf of changing the formula. That formula would obviously be beneficial to us if it were to come down to resolution. We don't know. But so those are just some of the things we've been asked about. Some of our previous bills, just to switch just a little bit. Basically, the way we normally start the legislative agenda is we take the bills from the previous legislative session, the ones that didn't pass. I will then go back to the people who asked us, the departments that asked us to push them and say, are they still a priority? Are they still important? Did something else happen this session that makes it valuable? Do we need to switch up and change it? So we still have about 5 from last year's, the vacant property registration, land bank, and some other ones that were they're similar to that. So we'll go back today. Matter of fact, an email was sent out to the departments asking them for their legislation for the year. Later on today, an email will go out to you guys asking you for the things that you want to be put on the legislative agenda for this year. So we want to start that process. I'm sure, I think Alyssa gave you a copy of what we want to do as a timeline this year, just so everybody can kind of see. As you can see on here, we have requests from the city department, legislative items, and then requests from the council body, the legislative items. And then you can see when we move into October, we'll follow up on those things. We'll share the priority list with our government relations people. That'll give us a chance to talk to the administration, talk with you guys, like kind of put together things, share our legislative, our lobbying, get together our sponsors. That way we'll know who's going to file the bills, who's going to support the bill, and then also send out the save the date. So this year we're trying to do, within the first 2 weeks of November, we're trying to do our legislative council mayor gather up, get together. And so right now we say a luncheon. Could be a lunch, it could be breakfast. We'll figure that out. We'll work with everybody because obviously 9 of you guys that we have to deal with. We've got the mayor. We've got to see when we can put it together and get a good location. We can get the most amount of people so we can get the most, for lack of a better term, bang for our buck. And just make sure that we can get enough people together. But this should give us plenty of time, even though the session does start early. But also, we could begin pre-filing our bills in November then. Once we had that, we get together with those, and then you can see December, continue pre-filing bills and continue the sponsorship process, which will probably continue because as we do our legislative agenda, once we start really talking about it, other cities and other organizations will reach out to us and say, hey, I see you're doing a legislative agenda. We'll talk to a lot of our boards, believe it or not, Vulcan Park, Railroad Park, other organizations need our assistance from time to time. We work with them on helping anything that may affect them, that may affect us. So we work with them. So we'll be pulling in information probably until session starts. But this way we have a timeline, we have a written timeline that we can look at and we can kind of know. And then that way everybody's on the same page with how we go about doing this.
Any questions, Dr. Quinn? I do want to thank you, Mr. Hilliard. I appreciate also the timeline because that gives us something concrete where we're like, what are you doing? What's happening? What's going on? And so this does put that in a certain amount of order. But Dr. Quinn, any questions about any of the information that's been shared?
Yeah, can you help me Claire? I don't know that it's on our timeline here, but in terms of the city having its legislative agenda, set with the session starting earlier in January, I would assume that the sooner that we can get that done, the better in terms of communicating that to our legislators. And then the other thing is that, once we have that established, I would assume that it would also be advisable for the city as a delegation to have some engagement, with state legislators to help advocate for those things on the legislative agenda. And,
Yeah, so it's not specifically written on here because it will continue to be worked on like we talked about. But just imagine this, by the time we have that legislative luncheon, we will have had the agenda because at the luncheon, we always present them with the agenda so to be done before. And by the time we go, where you see even in October, where it says share our legislative priority list with the state lobbyist, by then we'll have a tentative agenda. So we'll have a tentative, call it a tentative agenda because like I told you, a lot of things might change. We might actually get some things accomplished once people know it's on our legislative agenda. But more than likely, by the time you hit October and it says share our legislative priority list, that will be our agenda at that point. We'll probably still have counselors, the mayor or a department that might come up with something. But by the time we have that legislative luncheon, we will be giving them the agenda. So we'll have that. And absolutely, as we need, I've told you this before, we've had this discussion before, pre-filing can be a really good thing, and pre-filing can be a thing that's not necessarily so positive. The advantage of pre-filing is that people know it know what you're suggesting. You can gather support, and people know how to support it. The disadvantage to pre-filing is that people know what you're doing, and whereas you're gathering support, they can actually gather opposition to you. So a lot of times, there are other cities, other municipalities, other groups that will not put their legislative agenda out until a lot later because they don't want people to be able to team up months ahead of time on their agenda. We don't mind that for the most part, but there may be certain things that we put on our agenda later. It may not be necessarily the first day, but the people who need to know, the legislators or whatever, we can have our pre-talks. Not to mention the fact that there are times where an issue will pop up, especially with the way things are going right now in the country. There may be an issue and we may need to fight something or may need to do something proactively that might come up in late November, early December, late December. So it'll continue to be a living document, but absolutely.
What kind of timeline do the Big Ten mayors, where are they at in terms of September through December in terms of their legislative priorities?
So in a typical year, the next meeting, we would be doing the legislative agenda. In a typical year, that means that we will be coming in about a month. We'll be getting together. We go through everything. But this year is different because we know we'll have at least 4 or 5 new members of the Big Ten. So because of that, even to give you an example, we've been working with the city of Mobile. They really like our land bank revisions, and they're supportive. I've seen the bill. We've been going back and forth. Well, that's Mayor Sandy Stimpson's Mobile. But now we have a runoff going on for that seat, so we don't know who the mayor is going to be, and their legislative agenda will change according to that person. So we don't know if we'll have necessarily the support we thought we'd have coming from that direction, but we also don't know what they may bring to bear for new agenda items. So in other words, to answer your question, I'm not sure what it will be like this year. We may probably have a special call meeting or something prior to the legislative session.
Yeah, I'm just asking because, strategically, I think it's valuable to create alignment with, so in any big city, you got to chew gum, dribble the basketball, wash the car, clean the kitchen, you're doing all these things at the same time. And there are a lot of issues that are important to us. And yet we know, and we've had this discussion before, that it's advantageous to pick a few that are really important to you, and really hammer on those things. So, if what I'm saying is, if we just, again, strategically in our legislative agenda, create alignment with other municipalities, then, I know elected officials, pay attention to large constituency groups, so, the bigger the coalition, the better your chances are for success. So as we consider our legislative agenda, it would be good to be informed by what other large municipalities across the state are asking for.
Yeah, and they tend to be really good about sending that out, and that may actually happen this year a little bit differently. They may actually just go ahead and send it out. Normally, there are a few cities that are much more proactive, but once again, 2 of those cities are absolutely changing leadership. So because of that, once again, I'm sure they won't be as quick. There may be some common themes among those cities, but I'm sure some of the things tend to be changed by the leadership. So as soon as we can get that or whatever. But the good thing about it is, the work with ALM that you guys are already doing, that we'll do, a lot of that stuff does align with ALM. Sometimes the larger cities have a few different things, but typically it aligns with ALM. It's rare that we're not on the same page.
I'll just bring this up so it's on your radar, but Greg Cochran, who's the executive director of ALM, during our legislative committee meeting, one of the things that he reinforced with us, very forcefully, was that there's been an ongoing attempt at preemption to essentially take municipalities' licensing privileges for businesses away.
Yes, sir.
And this is something that's, there's a group called the National Federation for Independent Businesses, NFIB, that has been one of the primary advocacy groups, for this. And I understand that, if you're a small business and you work in multiple municipal jurisdictions, that having a business license in Birmingham and Irondale and Gardendale and Pleasant Grove, that's can probably become cumbersome. But those are important sources of revenue for us as municipalities to be able to provide the services that support those businesses and our citizens. But again, Greg was very adamant in his warning to municipalities that, hey, they have been trying to do this for years, and just given the alignment between the governor's office, the House, the Senate, and having super majorities in the legislature, that's something that, and even within that, some of the leadership changes, like what we saw with SB 330 last year, that happened in part because some of the leadership in previous years had helped, resist those types of changes. Well, anyway, what I'm saying is that, some of the things that may not have been successful in the past, there may be a pathway forward now. So that's something that is particularly, that would be devastating for any municipality, not just Birmingham. And so, but it's something that we have to be on guard and looking out for.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. Limiting us to collect those kind of fees, business license fees, permit fees, caps on fees, caps on impact fees, things like that. All of those are harmful to cities, especially since we don't have the right to just create something else to raise revenue. So we need the sources that we already have, and that is a constant conversation at every mayor's meeting, from Eastern Area Mayor's Association, Jefferson County, Big Ten. That is a big thing amongst municipalities, because what we do have, even taking away permit fees and other things that would flow back into the city, and it seems like it's not much, but as you, I didn't mention it, but one of the bills is the same bill that came up several times now that you mentioned that talked about the taking away sales tax on eyeglasses. And it seems, once again, it's taxation, sales tax exemption, sales and use tax exemption with local option provided for purchases of optical aids, including eyeglasses and contact lenses. That's HB 15. So it seems minor because it seems like, we're helping people out. But once again, it's a slippery slope thing. You get eyeglasses, then you get contacts, and you get other things like that. And what it is slowly eating away at the funding sources that we have, or the revenue that we have. Right. So we stay vigilant, which is why part of the legislative agenda we do every year is sometimes concepts like fighting anything that takes away from city revenue. Because people can always make one little thing sound great, but it's the one little thing that leads to the other little thing.
Thank you. Well, I am grateful to see this timeline. I believe it would greatly helps us. I know last year we wanted to be sure that we started early enough in this process, and that often when we get members of the delegation together, sometimes we get the comment, had we started early enough, or did we start to contact them? So it does look like this gives us, I won't say a generous amount of time, but it does give us time to talk through and even have the opportunity to make changes, because we want their feedback even before we get to the legislative session, and that's why we have that opportunity to talk with our colleagues.
Well, I will say that you can blame or credit Alyssa Thomas in government affairs with mandating
Very good.
that we have a written a written timeline. So you can look over at her and say that. So
Well, we appreciate
Very
that. I think when we were first seated, we always said we would be a process-driven council. So we feel that someone has heard us and knows that we really appreciate getting this type of document before us. One last thing I did want to ask about. I know we've continually heard, and that was some of the comments that we received at the ALM meeting. Typically, when it's an election cycle for the legislature, they don't tend to look at, I won't say the hot topics, but
Yeah.
some of the bills that would be most contentious, or they've got their mind. I won't speak for them, but of course, it's in the back of the head that they've got to come out of session and then start run for reelection. I guess I feel as if they have it a little better than us, because we continue to have to do the business for our city while we're running, and so at least they are not in session, is correct. Technically, you're always running, but before they have to actually start that campaigning.
no, think about it. They've already started.
That's
They've already
right.
started. So they feel that's why this session will be rushed, and they always, it's January through March, and they'll start burning days, because as people have opponents who are at home and they're here, they're in Montgomery, people feel like they have to expedite session. And the reason why I said it's changed a little bit is because what used to be considered to be hot and contentious, and the partisan direction that we've gotten in sometimes is better for them to run on those things that we would consider to be, why would they do something so controversial, but it helps them stand out. So that's why I said it's changed a little bit. That has always been like election year, you're safe, they're gonna stay away from hot topics, but.
Well, because I found it interesting, I think in every one of the standing committee meetings, there was some mention of the interim police chief and giving that power on a state level to come into a municipality and do that, because it impacts everyone when you start talking about that. So you would wonder if they want to take on that type of topic, but as you said, when you start talking about bipartisan initiatives.
I will tell you, look nationally at some of the things that have gone in that are very similar to this, but more direct with law enforcement, and you'll see that it's not something that will be negative to certain sides of the aisle to push this kind of thing.
All right. Well, again, we thank you. I'm appreciative of giving us the feedback that you provided us about pre-filed bills and just talking a little bit about our process. And so we will be looking forward to going through this and coming out with a real strong legislative agenda, and one that we can actually go out and lobby for and help us. Thank you so much. Well, Dr. O'Quinn, do you have any other? We don't have any old and new business. Do you have any items that you would want to put out there for old and new business?
Yeah, I got one thing.
Yes.
In Earl, this is, something that's, I hope we never have to have a really serious discussion about, but, I see the state elected officials really kind of bending over backwards to appease the federal administration. Our OPI director just came in and told us that Birmingham was brought up in conversation, in the White House today. All of this talk about mobilizing National Guard and those sorts of things. So, again, I hope that we never have to, deal with those types of things, but, I'm just bringing it up because I don't want I would prefer, that those types of situations don't catch us flat-footed. So to the extent that we need to have a conversation about those types of things and what we, do or don't do in those situations, I would appreciate it.
No, that's not a problem. I will reiterate, because I've obviously had this conversation multiple times in the last 60 days. I agree with you, and honestly, we can do planning, but understand that federal, state, and then the municipality, you have no authority to challenge certain things. So you can prepare in-house as to how you're going to accept certain things, but you can always file lawsuits and then go into the courts with the same organizations, the same people and same groupings or whatever, and that's the only thing you really can do. But certain things, if you've followed some of the national trends with, let's say, the enlisting of National Guard to help do certain things, you have seen those cities really fight back, at least initially for some of them, and then you see the direction it goes in. So what we can do is we can stay vigilant. The best thing is, like you said before, to really reinforce our processes. So hopefully we don't get to that position where there's an inciting event that allows people, if you know what happened really negatively last year to us, or last legislative cycle to us here, there's always an inciting event that allows people to do what they've been trying to do anyway. Because they're trying all the time. It's just when that inciting event. So we just have to really work on our processes and honestly make sure that we all sides stay on the same page, because when we look disjointed or when we look broken, that's when they pounce.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. O'Quinn. Well, at this time, I'm thankful for the information that's been shared. I appreciate government affairs and also the discussion that we've had about ALM. So, Dr. O'Quinn, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.